Welcome for attending this presentation. I'm going to be presenting on a formative evaluation that we did in Tanzania in March of this year. In Tanzania, we have a project called Viable Sweet Potato Technologies in Africa, which is looking at introducing different technologies and also focusing on nutrition and health. So this study was actually to understand what was happening on the ground in terms of gender, so that we could also come up with some strategies to mainstream gender into the project. Okay, so how do I move it? Okay. It's not moving. Or maybe I should resume slideshow. Okay. Yeah, okay. No, it's not connected. Yeah, we are having some technical challenges, so we are just addressing that and we'll be back shortly.
Hey, Queenie, how are you? Very good.
Okay. Yeah, still it's not going to the next slide. So in the presentation, because it was a gender formative evaluation, we tried to arrange it according to the objectives of the project. So the project has like 4 objectives, which I will talk about briefly before I start on the results. So in the first part, we will talk about the role of sweet potato in food security and nutritional security in Tanzania. We will also look at, of course, objective 1, which was looking at increased production and consumption of nutritious OSSC varieties through an integrated agricultural nutrition set. Objective 2 was looking at whether we could actually they wanted to establish entrepreneurs and medium-scale seed businesses. So we are also going to be looking at whether it is possible to do that with sweet potato values and seed. Then objective 3, smallholder and medium-scale farmers. We're trying to improve their productivity through access to quality planting material and good agronomic practices. There's also a focus on improved nutrition, knowledge and practices. And also another objective was also to ensure that producers and traders of sweet potato utilize improved storage and marketing of fresh OSSP routes. So we also went beyond these objectives to also look at how to involve men and also to kind of like try to understand what are some of the lessons that we can learn from the VISTA project for other projects as well. So this study was conducted in 7 districts in Tanzania where the VISTA project is being implemented. So the way we structured it was to have 2 focus group discussions, one with women, one with men in each district, using men with men and women who cultivate orange flake sweet potato or who are beneficiaries of the project. We also wanted to do 1 FGD with men, 1 FGD with women in each of the districts, with farmers who cultivate sweet potato but not necessarily orange flake sweet potato, but we were not able to reach our target due to unforeseen events in the field, so we ended up having 5-5. We also talked to we also had individual interviews with the decentralized brain multipliers, 7 men, 7 women, and we also had individual interviews with extension officers, as well as the VISTA focal points in both government and NGO. And we only had 9 men and 2 women. We couldn't find as many women extension officers. So in terms of the role of sweet potato in food nutrition and food security and nutrition, we asked people what are the threats to food security. And the threats that they mentioned, they talked about climate variability, lack of finance, pests and diseases, lack of knowledge, also existence of counterfeit products and poor quality seed on the market. And also they also mentioned other things including lack of storage mechanisms for sweet potato, lack of income generating opportunities. Those were mentioned by women, and men also mentioned things like soil fertility and health as also threats to food security. So we asked them, okay, so in terms of this threats to food security, what are you doing in your communities to kind of like, what are your responses to this threat? We found that in terms of climate variability, they mentioned that they are increasing cultivation of drought-tolerant crops like sweet potato. They are adopting irrigation and also increased use of pesticides and also crop storage, because if they store some crops in the previous year, they could sometimes be able to weather a long dry period and things like that. And also when there is sometimes when there's a lot of water or little water in terms of rain, they also have this increase in pests and diseases, which also increases their use of these pesticides. In terms of pests and diseases, they also talked about use of sweet potato as a rotation crop. Women were mostly the ones who mentioned that, and men mentioned use of pesticides. And in terms of finance, they mentioned that because there was lack of finance, they didn't get access to loans and the other sources of finance. So they sometimes engage in contract farming, working on other people's farms to be able to access food, sometimes in exchange for food, sometimes in exchange for cash, and sometimes they also do barter trade. And in that barter trade, they were saying that sometimes if you have fertilizer and you don't have food, you can actually barter your fertilizer in exchange for food from someone who has access. So we have already started talking about the role of sweet potato, particularly in terms of response to drought as a drought-tolerant crop. We also asked farmers about what are the important crops, the top 3 most important crops in your area. And maize was regarded as that in many groups as a very important crop, followed by beans, and sweet potato was number 3, followed by cassava, sunflower, and those other crops. And so we asked them, okay, of the crops that you mentioned is the top 3 important crops, why are these crops the top 3? So in that graph in green actually shows some of the reasons why those crops were chosen as the top 3. They mentioned some crops that they are food crops, they are commercial crops. So like maize falls in both the food crop and the commercial crop category. Some crops were also regarded as appropriate to the environment. For example, sweet potato in terms of marginal areas and also drought conditions. They also mentioned beans, maize, pigeon peas is appropriate. They also mentioned some crops, also such as maize, which they said that they can also process these crops into different products. For example, maize can be processed into beer. They can also make different kinds of dishes from maize and so on. So what we can gather from this analysis is that for crops to be regarded as important, they actually need to have multiple uses. You cannot just have a crop that is just servicing one particular thing. If it is just serving one aspect, then sometimes farmers do not want to invest in that crop, and they may not regard it as a very important crop compared to others. So we also asked women, groups that had mentioned sweet potato is an important crop. For example, 6 out of 11 women's groups mentioned sweet potato is an important crop. So when you look at this table, these figures are only for women because something went wrong with the men who were facilitating the men's groups, because they didn't ask this question, but they were supposed to ask it. So I don't know what went wrong, but the women discussed this question. That's why we have only the women data here. So the women were also asked why is sweet potato important, and also because we are also RTB, I also asked about cassava since it has been talked about in the most important crops. So they mentioned that sweet potato is a commercial crop that is to women, and that it is also a food crop. That's why they mentioned. So out of the 11 groups that we talked to, 11 women's groups, 6 of those groups did not regard sweet potato as in the top 3 most important. So it was only 5 groups that regarded sweet potato is in the top 3 most important. So we then asked both the men and the women, because although men didn't do this ranking, they kind of discussed in their groups why they prefer certain crops such as maize instead of sweet potato and so on. So we also asked them why, both men and women, why did you not rank sweet potato in the top 3? So they said sweet potato is a food crop and does not provide cash. So they also want to have access to cash. So crops that provide cash such as maize and beans then get top priority. They also said that sweet potato is easy to spoil and cannot be relied to provide food all year round, which is also different from maize and beans because they don't have appropriate storage. And also they said that sweet potato did not have many uses because they said the only way they consume sweet potato is by boiling. But if they could have other uses for sweet potato, then maybe it could also increase in terms of importance. So when we look at these findings, I think the basic thing is that if we expand the utilization of sweet potato, storage as well as developing sweet potato value chains, it may also improve the importance of sweet potato as well as increase farmer investment in the crop. Then now we move to objective 1, which looked at increased production and consumption of nutritious OFSP varieties through an integrated nutrition technology set. So what we did, we looked at what are the production and marketing related constraints that farmers face. But before we started talking about the constraints, we also wanted to understand who is doing what in terms of the gender division of labor in potato. So the first graph on the left is the graph on division of labor between men and women, and the second graph is adult men and women's perceptions about youth involvement, because we didn't have youth in the sample, but we also asked those adults that we talked to what they thought about youth involvement in sweet potato cultivation and farming. So when you look at this table, you will see that, like for example, if you look at the bottom bars in the first graph, we have land selection, men involvement. So the bars in blue, they show women's perception. The bars in orange, they show men's perception. So this is, the first bar is about land selection, men's involvement, but it's only women who said men are involved, but men didn't see themselves as involved in that particular activity. So when we look at that first graph, we see that for storage, planting and vine preparation, women and men consistently overestimated their own involvement and underestimated the involvement of the other sex in these activities. And we don't know why this happens, but when we look at the overall division of labor, we find that men and women generally agreed that for most activities related to sweet potato, women are more involved than men, except maybe in making ridges where men were also more highly involved than women. And this is because, as we will see later in the discussion, sweet potato was also regarded as a woman's crop that women cultivate and sell to gain an income. That's why men were kind of like letting women do everything, because it was a woman's crop. And then when we look at the perceptions on youth involvement, we see that men consistently underestimated the involvement of youth in many activities, whilst women actually positively rated women's involvement. And I think this is also because sweet potato is a woman's crop, so women are the ones who are also relying mostly on youth in terms of labor. So maybe that is why they were more likely to actually see that youth were involved. So we also wanted to understand, okay, so why is sweet potato perceived as a woman's crop in this community? So like in one group, men, they said that because of Mufumo Dome, I put it in highlights because the person who translated said it means patriarchal system, but I'm not so sure. But they said that women and girls are considered as tools or instruments for work. That's why they are more involved in this sweet potato than men. But then women also say that sometimes men are irresponsible, and also the gender norms dictate that women are the ones who are involved maybe in sweet potatoes. But these two are from the same community. So men and women were basically agreeing that the gender norms in that community were not really favorable for women in many ways. Some women, in some groups, they also say that it is not that men are lazy, but it's just that during the planting time for sweet potato, men sometimes are also concentrating on maize and other crops that gives them money. So that is why they are not involved in sweet potato. And also because sweet potato is a woman's crop that they use to feed their children and so on, that's why women are involved. Then of course others say that in their ethnic group among the Sukumas, it is usually women who cultivate this crop. And also men undermine this crop because it does not have a good market for increasing family income. So men are also interested in markets and in increasing family income. Then when we looked at production constraints, we asked men and women to also rate what are their top 3 production constraints. We had a whole list of constraints, and then they had to also rate those ones. So in the top 3 constraints that men and women selected, the bars that are in black and white are men, and then the colored ones, blue and orange, are women. So we find that in pests and diseases, men dominated. It's like men were the ones that were actually perceiving more production constraints than women in terms of sweet potato, like pests and disease, lack of vines, weather-related constraints, lack of markets, lack of fertilizers, and so forth. So then we also wanted to understand what are the, who makes the decisions in terms of when to adopt crops. And the general answer was that, like in Tanzania, in most of the communities that we visited, they talked about splitting that the family land is divided into 3. There is usually a joint parcel of land where both husband and wife are contributing, and sometimes it's usually for food. Then there is a different parcel, which is a man's parcel, where he grows commercial crops and he can do whatever he wants with the money that he grows. Sometimes he pays for fees or buys cattle, but women sometimes they don't have control over how that money is used. And then there is a parcel that women are given by their husbands where they can grow crops that they want. And sometimes on those parcels, that's where they cultivate sweet potato. So they said that for crops that trade on the line between food and commerce in the joint plot, then sometimes they have joint decisions because it affects the family food. But then men and as household heads, they have final say on adoption decisions, and they have more say on commercial crops cultivated on men's parcels of land. And then women have more knowledge of sweet potato than men, hence they have also a big influence in influencing a decision to adopt new sweet potato varieties. So, however, when you now look at those parcels, the men's parcels, the women's parcels, and the joint parcels, what women said, like in that community, we find that women said for their parcels, that is the men, they select fertile lands. They also provide better farm management like fertilizers, spraying for pests and diseases, weeding, pruning, watering, unlike the joint parcels and also unlike the women's parcels. So the parcels where women are now cultivating sweet potato and other crops which are regarded as women's crops or for food security and things like that, they don't receive as much attention in terms of investment in inputs than the men's parcels and the joint parcels. Then of course, this is this is kind of similar to what I mentioned before, where women said they are responsible for making the decision to adopt new sweet potato varieties because men do not cooperate or contribute when it comes to sweet potato because they don't prefer it, and they also work hard on maize because if there is a shortage of maize at home, he will be the one responsible to provide money to buy for the family. So you will see this So I think also sometimes to understand what's happening with sweet potato, you also need to understand what is happening with other crops, not just to focus on sweet potato. You have like a figure that is not very complete. Then we asked about marketing constraints. So of course women mentioned more marketing constraints than men. I thought that was also because women were the ones who were engaged in sweet potato marketing and selling, so maybe they are the ones who are facing these problems, such as of course lack of market, poor prices, bad infrastructure, low production, and so forth and so on. And they also mentioned that there was also lack of consumer awareness and no industrial buyers, which also leads to lack of market. So there is also this concern that maybe if sweet potato becomes very profitable, women will lose, they will lose the crop to men and so forth. So when I was asking some men whether if sweet potato becomes profitable, they will take away the land from women and they will, or maybe if another crop becomes much more profitable, then they will take away the land from women and grow that crop. Then in one community they said that they have this problem of Sweetpotato, which is like, the translation was like a forest of reeds. That I think they are growing in some low-lying areas, and they have this type of weed which really spreads very fast. So when they cultivate other crops and remove them, they don't want that land to lie idle, because if it lies idle, when the following season comes, it will be very difficult to remove that weed. So then they allow women to grow sweet potato during that time, so that weed doesn't come out. So for them they say even if other crops become more profitable, we'll still let the women use, because it helps us to get rid of that weed when we are planting our crops. And of course this woman DVM was also saying that because of it will not happen, men will not take over, because we have the same intention of increasing family income, food, and also improving the health of the family. So when they go to the hospital and they are told your child needs nutritious food, and that orange flaked sweet potato is a nutritious food, then there is no way a man can say you are not going to grow it. So that aspect of actually focusing also on nutrition education also for men is also very, very important, to ensure that maybe this orange flaked sweet potato can also take root. There was also an output under this objective to look at whether we have this agroecological adapted OSSP variety with market attributes available that can actually be adopted. And so we asked the men and women to actually list what are their preferences in terms of sweet potato. And the most preferred traits, so of course early maturity market, big, good taste, and so forth. You will see that maybe there is not really much difference in terms of men and women's preferences, but there is a difference in terms of the range of preferences. Because maybe women are also, the ones who are involved in a lot of other activities related to sweet potato. But then, for some reason, also the men's group facilitators didn't ask about the three least preferred traits, so we only have the box for women here, which shows low dry matter, if it has a lot of fibers, if the taste is not good, if it is affected by pests and diseases, and so forth. So we were asking for the different varieties of sweet potato that we cultivate. Of course, there were these varieties which are local varieties, like this one, Port Blue, Buka, Wundi, Kilombero, and so forth, which they said that they are preferred because of early maturity. And Kaboda is also preferred because of early maturity, and it has also big roots, but they were also saying that the only disadvantage that the roots are fewer per plant. And then some of the varieties, for example, they were talking about this Kabulu, which I think is also like a local variety. They say it has a very good taste, so they make mapalage, the color turns black, and it's not a nice color, and they don't like it. So also things like color and things like women were very interested in such things. And this is, for me, it was also particularly interesting because, like women were saying, egg sweet potato matures late. It also takes large space in the farm and disturbs other crops when you mix crops, and you do not get a good harvest. So because women don't have land, sometimes they're also interested in crops that they can actually mix with other crops because they can't expand the land that they are cultivating. Then there was an objective on entrepreneurs establishing financially sustainable medium scale seed and root enterprises and so forth. So we try to look also at the viability of seed enterprises. So before we went to that one, we wanted to do a portrait of a DVM, like who is a DVM basically. So we found that at least in Tanzania, in those 7 districts where we went, women were mostly DVM. It was because men were engaged in other income-generating activities such as mining or being mechanics and so forth. Sweet potato was regarded as a woman's crop, so men lacked interest. They also said that there is no market for sweet potato roots and vines, which motivates men. And also vine dissemination and vine marketing training was targeted towards groups, and the men were not interested in joining sweet potato groups. So they didn't receive the training, and therefore were not also involved in vine multiplication. And then there was a man who was involved in vine multiplication. So we were also wondering, oh, so he was the only man in that group. Then we interviewed him as an individual interview, and he said that men actually they wondered why he was cultivating sweet potato, and there was a lot of pressure for him from other men in the community to drop out of vine multiplication, because they were saying, why are you doing things that are supposed to be done by women? So I think that from this perspective now, there may also be need for behavior change communication to encourage men to be involved and to invest in sweet potato as a food as well as a market crop in places where sweet potato is regarded as a main crop. And of course, other people who also decided to start multiplication, they mentioned that they started multiplication because they've been approached by the extension worker, or they received training and they've been told that sweet potato is nutritional qualities, you could process it into chapati, juice, and things like that. So from this perspective, actually the nutritional training was also kind of like a driver for many people to start multiplying vines. So we also wanted to know if, for example, sweet potato vines are being sold, whether men and women will be able to buy the vines. So when you look at the, like from the middle to the right side, it's mostly men groups, whether they perceive themselves as able to buy. From the middle to the left side, it's mostly women's groups, whether they perceive that women in their community were able to buy seed. So women are perceived as more likely than men not to afford planting material, hence they prefer to save their own material. Men say that as household heads, they control household finances and can afford to buy the planting material if they want. And women also were perceived as willing to buy planting material if they can afford it. And men is willing to buy sweet potato planting material if there was a market for the roots. So, and then of course women also say, both men and women also said sometimes men also buy if they encourage their wives to buy this sweet potato varieties. So then we asked them, okay, so now we know about your ability to buy, whether you can afford, but are you willing to buy? So we asked for the white flaked varieties and then also for the orange flaked varieties. So what we saw is that like the black bars are the ones who said that they were not willing to buy for the white flaked sweet potato varieties. And when we ask people also why they were not willing to buy, of course, because you will see that if you compare the OSSP and the white ones, people are more willing to buy the white OSSP, the orange sweet potato than the white sweet potato. So the reason was they said that they had received training on the OSSP and they now know the benefits, particularly the health benefits. And also the white sweet potatoes, they were available in the community, so there was really no reason to buy, whereas the OSSP was not yet available, so they had to buy planting material. But they said that if the orange sweet potato became also ubiquitously available, then they may not be buying, because then they will be able to save their own seed and also plant it. So I think from this perspective then, if we want to have a viable seed business enterprise, we also need to have this training for farmers about seed generation and so on, so that they are able to, so that they see the need to buy clean planting material, even when planting material is now ubiquitously available in the community. We also asked about trends in terms of demand. Here I just gave some of the things that people said. They thought, for example, women mostly, they thought that there was increased production and availability of seed in the past 3 to 4 years because of improvements in seed in the root market, that there was a lot of people buying seed and also the sweet potato roots. Women and also some men, they also perceived an increase in demand because of availability of improved varieties, that now people are demanding more planting material because of the improved varieties that are available. But then mostly men groups now, there were a lot of men groups who said that there has been no change in terms of demand or availability because sweet potato continues to be a minor crop. So I think that the differences now between men and women are also related to the role that sweet potato plays in their lives. Because while sweet potato was a big top income earner for women, it is not for men, because men sell crops like maize and sesame seeds and also offer employment. We also looked at the seed networks and challenges to seed dissemination. So when you look at the seed networks, you will see that mostly people were saying that there is a DVM at the center where they can actually get seed. But so we asked the DVMs, the female, where they are also, to whom they also sell their seed, and we asked the farmers also from whom they get seed. So people are talking about they can get seed from DVMs, they can get seed from individual farmers, from other church members, from family and friends. Sometimes they get from nearby villages and also other group members, other farmer group members. So when we looked at the seed networks, they were mostly female, though men are also increasingly joining, and sweet potato is becoming more viable in terms of marketing. And so when we asked what are some of the constraints in terms of access to seeds, they talked about lack of money to rent more land and purchase inputs to multiply vines. They talked about also shortage of starter material from the project, that there is very little starter material to start with, so they are not able to multiply a lot of seeds. And men were also not willing to join groups, so they didn't have this material. Prevalence of diseases and pests, and also lack of know-how and appropriate technologies on how to deal with them. And of course, peer pressure for men to regard sweet potato is not an important crop may also prevent them from actively seeking seed. And then there was also the issue of access to planting material and also use of these agronomic practices. That was also one of the objectives. So we asked people about their perceptions in terms of sweet potato seed security. They said that they have 3 ways basically of purchasing vines, also conserving vines. They can conserve their own, they can purchase vines from different food sources, or they can ask from their friends and neighbors. There was also a consensus among men and women that all farmers have access to enough planting material for local varieties. The OSSC varieties were not available. So we decided also to look at seed security in general. What is the situation also for other crops like maize, cassava, beans, sweet potatoes, the ones that have been listed is important. So farmers said that maize is both a commercial crop and the food crop, so they always have seed, like 100% of the families that they face the seed from their crop. So if farmers also regard the crop as important for food and commerce, they are also willing to buy seed to produce it, such as beans, which they said was difficult for them to store, so they were willing to buy from other areas. And then also, of course, when we also talk to other farmers, they also mentioned that in areas where sweet potato is regarded as important, the price is also a bit higher, showing also growing opportunities for seed. So what we can also gather from this analysis is that if sweet potato value chains are developed and sweet potato is commercialized, seed businesses may also be able to be established and become sustainable, because people want to make sure that there is a market for when they buy seed, there is a market for the product. We also need to, of course, to train farmers on seed dissemination and so on, because when you look at this side, it's for example, farmers said for maize, 100% of households depend on planting seed selected from the previous harvest, and the crop yield isn't good. To have better seed, you need money to buy it, and very few are able to buy the good seed. So I think we also need to really hammer that issue of the generation and so on for farmers to realize the importance of buying seed. And this is not only for potato, but sweet potato, but also for other crops. Of course, this is how farmers identify quality planting material, both men and women, yield, leaf color, if it doesn't have to, if it is disease-free, it has a health stem, the productivity is good, and so forth and so on. And then when we also ask them about how they deal with pest and disease, we find that mostly men use pesticides and rodenticides compared to women. Women were not really using these ones, except for some of the women deviants, but in the FTDs it didn't come out. Some other methods such as setting traps, chasing away animals are also things that men do. Women usually practice good agronomic practices. And of course, there were other people who did nothing, or they used some of these traditional methods. We also wanted to know what type of whether they have nutritional knowledge and practices in these communities. We saw when we asked about what are the benefits of OSSP, for example, people we see that because women are the ones who are targeted with most of the training in groups, they also mentioned a lot of benefits compared to men. In some of the benefits, of course, are the vitamin A, good eyes, can be processed into other products. That was also mentioned only by women. But I don't know, they also mentioned other things which I don't know if they are true or not, such as make hair black, help to clean ears. I don't know, but they mentioned a lot of a wide range of benefits, but it was mostly women because they are targeted. And then all farmers that were not members of groups stated that they are not aware of nutritional benefits of OSSP in those 10 groups that we talked about, the ones who were not cultivating OSSP. And of course, women listed a more diverse list of benefits. And then when you look at information sources, again, you see that it was different for men and women. Because women mentioned the VISTA project, they mentioned NADO, they mentioned the village chairperson, and men were mentioning people or group members who were trained, extension officers, district extension officers. So their sources were actually not the same sources of information. So we wanted to know, we asked both men and women what can actually be done to encourage men to participate in nutrition training. And then you will see that they talked about improving targeting, such as targeting men, because they are also engaged in making decisions about child rearing and so forth, and maybe integrating that nutrition component, maybe when you are training men on marketing and things like that, because they may not necessarily come to a training on nutrition. Then also to take advantage of community meetings that men attend, that was also suggested, and also to use men peer groups to spread information of OSSP and nutrition, and also to encourage them to attend nutrition training, because they said it is better for men to hear of this from other men, then they will be more likely to kind of like also adopt some of the nutrition messages. And then in terms of agronomic training, we actually found that men were saying that they are the ones who are more likely to attend because they are heads of households and so forth and so on, but they are not the ones who are actually involved in the production. And one of the things that was also mentioned by both men and women's groups was that sometimes facilitation skills during the training are not gender responsive. They don't encourage women to participate, so they said that maybe facilitation skills could be improved. And they also said they needed follow-up training because sometimes they're not able to get everything just in one training. They also needed learning visits to women, said that they learn better by seeing what others are doing, and also to increase practicals and visualization in some of the agronomic training. Then in terms of the root introduction of storage and marketing of fresh fruits, these are the type of storages that the project wants to introduce, this granary one and the pit storage. So we also ask farmers to evaluate, to just do like a discussion about what would be some of their constraints, for example, to use storage. So we ask farmers, in most communities they do not store, and in the communities that store, they cut and dry the sweet potato in the sun, and then put it in bags and then keep it in the house. That's how they store. So when we ask them now about what are some of the things that can prevent you from using, they said that lack of money, of course, to build those stores, that was mostly mentioned by men. Lack of construction materials were by women, and women also were very worried that these technologies would make them more dependent on men. Because when you look at this, they said, oh, this is about construction, and so we have to depend on men on construction. And also, when the roof starts leaking, we have to ask the men to make the roof for us. So it will be very difficult, especially if the men don't regard sweet potato as important and they think that they need to invest their money in other molds for things. But when they were now comparing the pit storage and the granary one, some farmers thought that the pit storage would be less secure than the granary, but I didn't quite get why they thought that. They were also worried that the pit storage and granary will increase the dependence of men, but familiarity in terms of storage plays a role in preferences. Because in some communities where they've used a granary to store maize, they prefer the granary. In Wangingombe, where they've used a similar method of a pit storage, they prefer the pit storage. So we need also to understand, so sometimes it is also much faster to promote a technology that farmers actually is familiar to them. So we asked them, okay, so these things that you've mentioned is the problems, constraints that can stop you from using some of those technologies. Oh yeah, like for this one, the pit one, farmers are also worried that maybe snakes could get in, because apparently in that area they also have problems with snakes and things like that, so they also wanted some clarification. There was also a problem on where in some communities they didn't have rivers nearby, and these technologies they also need to have a lot of sand, so there was also a question about, so where do we get the sand that we need to put in there? So they now started, so we asked them, okay, so what are the solutions that you may be able to suggest to take care of these? So they said, they asked if the technologies could be modified to use local available material such as ash instead of sand, which they didn't have. Of course, women said that we could formulate women's groups to support each other with construction materials. In terms of theft, they said that they were worried that both the granary and the pit was not safe from theft. So particularly for the women, they were asking, instead of using these two technologies, can we have other alternative technologies such as keeping and drying, where we can keep and dry and store in our own homes, and we will also not depend on men to maintain the buildings and stuff like that. And then, of course, they also said that they would need intense training before the technology is rolled out. Then we also wanted to know how we can appeal to both men and women farmers, in the communities. So they said that some of the farmers and also some extension officers, they were suggesting that maybe there's need for some non-group-based approaches to attract men, but farmer groups were regarded as better for women. Target men with positive messages about sweet potato so that they can see that it's an important crop. Developing of sweet potato value chains to attract women. Use village hamlets to encourage men to attend sweet potato training, because apparently men listen to these village hamlets much more than if they do to extension officers. Liaise with local government partners to raise awareness about OSSP to men, because sometimes local governments, they always have meetings in these villages. So when they are having other meetings, then they could also talk about OSSP, because men are always attending these meetings. And also, of course, encouraging men to allow wives to attend training and also having these practical sessions. Then in terms of the extension officers, because we also asked the extension officers, what do you as extension officers need for you to do a better job in this project? So they also mentioned that the means of transport is limited, there's limited availability of motorbikes in the district, which also makes it very difficult to monitor and offer support. because they were saying that other projects, I don't know, like the ones that are being funded by the Japanese, they have like a project motorbike, and they may only have one motorbike in the whole district. So it is very difficult for them. So in terms of monitoring, they were even saying, we just wait for the SIP car to come, and then when they come, then we go with them to the village to do the monitoring, which is kind of very difficult for them. They also didn't have hardware support, such as computers. They may also not even have a computer in their office, or maybe it will be there but it's broken down, and then we are demanding reports and things like that, which they can't send to us. They also said that maybe we could also expand targeting to target schools and other places to spread this message and also the vine. And then they also thought that maybe they also need to invest more in vein multiplication and dissemination to meet demand. There was also one other problem, because I think there are two groups, extension workers from the government and extension workers from the NGOs, and they were having some kind of a fight, because the extension workers from the NGO, they thought that the extension workers from the government regard themselves as much more superior to them. So then it's now a problem of coordination and sometimes duplication of responsibilities, and then sometimes the government workers want to push everything to the NGO workers. So they said that there's need for better coordination between the different partners who are involved. Then they also talked of improving timing of training, timing that should be conducive for both men and women to attend. They were also worried about budget instability, because they said sometimes they've made plans and then the budget is cut or something happens and they have to change the plan again. So that is also making their work a little bit difficult. Then they also said that the project time frame is also too short to make a difference, particularly in communities where sweet potato is a marginal crop. So they have to first of all convince people that sweet potato is an important crop. Once they've done that, then they move to the next step. So they thought that the project time frame was not really very long enough. Then we asked them, okay, so these are the issues that we have raised. What are the other positive things? That was our last question actually. What are the positive things that you can also say, oh, you know what, this is a positive thing from VISTA that others can copy from the project. So they talked about the training structure as a positive thing. They said training offered by VISTA is regarded, is positive, because they do the awareness raising training that they've done with farmers is actually encouraged cooperation in terms of decision making in the household, because sometimes when they're doing awareness training, they try to target both men and women, and then it improves their coordination in households. And then they also said because of the training, some men are also beginning to invest more in sweet potato, cultivation. And they also particularly appreciated the participatory nature of the VISTA project. They said that decision making and planning is inclusive and created by informed partners, because they said that in some other projects, the partner just comes and tells them, yes, this project is what we are going to do, go and implement. But with VISTA, there's actually discussion about what are we going to do and so forth. And they also said that VISTA also takes into account the environment, and also a flexible approach which respects partner knowledge and experience was also very appreciated. So these are some of the findings. The report is also available for those who would want to just look at it and get more details. I don't know, so that is the end of the presentation. So I don't know who is sharing the meeting, in case there are people with questions and things like that. And also to check the screen for the people who are joining by. We are checking from there. Okay.
Yes, you can. Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Netsayi, for that very good and all-encompassing presentation. So I invite any questions from the floor. I think we can do one round and then I'll do another. So for now, we can do something.
I just want to share the first information on the source of violence that the
from the conservation, the area from the field, and from the parcel. I'm wondering why they're not mentioning the advice they are getting from the field. Because the regional is legal. From the other, parcels, and also. The second question is related to the client. I think the data you are asking the group participants, which are coming on the discussion. So the idea is, in most cases, all the cases are willing to change. So my question is this information is really relevant and interesting? Because sometimes in the group, when they are making the decision, they say, okay, disagree, and I don't want to create any problem, I'm willing to buy. So I was expecting, did you have some comparative group that were asking individuals at the time, so that it was a really deep direction. And the third question is somewhere in the beginning of the implementation you mentioned, we are saying Sweetpotato is not cash flow, it doesn't have much goods, just support in the day. And the other is the union sales, as it was coming up the commercial growth. So how these things are done, because somebody are saying not cash flow, the other things are saying commercial growth.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really a lot of information. Stick to the main problem of okay. One is like kind of solution, this kind of qualitative work. I see some of the quantitative stuff also there inside. And going into fundamental design, the way you design the samples, the way you, because you're comparing two groups, when looking at your presentation, since beginning being I was like, you always try to compare between two groups, right? Min and one. So I think it is very important from the statistical point of view that you need to certify this through min and one, the samples, like something around more than 100 min, that includes 100 and min and one. So then only it makes sense for us to compare two groups. And secondly, like we say economic sections, we don't see just comparing two groups, we see this statistically different from each other, so that you can take a mistake from them. And this is a kind of advice and solution. And the second one, the attributes for willingness to pay, you have identified a lot of indicators, but is it a kind of, you ask them and open-ended, or is it like closed-ended question? The last one is like, of course, many will not participate because there is no business. The moment they see business, I'm sure they will be involved automatically. So I always think it should be a demand-driven approach, rather than you don't have to motivate somebody to go to business. If somebody, the moment they see business, definitely they will be involved in it. Now our job is to show that there is business or not. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My first question is from the already asked. I was going to ask what was the understanding of a commercial cost and why the same state acknowledges that it doesn't provide cash, yet when they are asked why it is important, they say it is a commercial cost. And the second one has to do with the maturity of the cost. I think you mentioned that they say oil is still mature here, but was there a specific variety that they were referring to? And then thirdly was the aspect of youth involvement. These were perceptions of the adults and not really the youth themselves presenting their involvement. To what extent can you rely on these perceptions?
Okay. Yeah, so thank you all for your questions. Oh, sorry. Thank you all for your questions. I'll start with the question that Temesgen asked. So when you look at these seed networks, you will find that people are also getting seeds from the DVMs. And the DVMs are people that have been trained by the project. So in that respect, and then when they are also purchasing rice, because the second one here is they are conserving and they are also purchasing, so they can also purchase from DVM. So purchasing is not limited to, and even the rice that they are conserving, some of those are rice that they have actually received from the DVM of the project, and then they conserve in their own gardens. Yeah. And then there's a question on the willingness to pay, whether it is we didn't ask people in the group to say, I still remember, I have to check actually the truth, but one of the questions that we asked here was it was not about the person in the group, but it was about, if you have 10 people in this village, women, out of those 10, how many of those 10 women will be able to buy seed or will be willing to buy seed? Then the group discussion, and then we also capture the discussion, which is also in the report. Then they discuss, then they come up with an agreed number. To say in this community, out of 10 people, out of 10 women, only 2 will be able to buy seed. So then that is the number that they come up with. Yes. So out of that one, they will say everyone in this community would want to buy. But in this other one, then they say, okay, maybe like men we think that for the white ones, only 5 out of 10 men in the community would be willing to buy. Then we ask them, okay, why are they willing to buy? Why do you say that maybe everyone is willing to buy, or why do you say that people are not willing to buy? Something like that. That's how we did it. So it was not about you in the focus group, are you willing to buy planting material? Then in terms of why it is not a commercial crop, I think this is, I'm not sure where the slide is. But what I can say about that is that if you look at the discussion, you will see that out of the 11 groups that we talked to, only 5 of them are the ones that listed sweet potato in the most important crop. 5 out of 11, yeah, of the women. So the ones who are saying that it's not a commercial crop, it's only boiled ones and so forth, are people belonging to the 6 groups that did not list sweet potato in the top 3 most important crops. So I don't know if that has been addressed. Then in terms of screening, I think that data analysis for quantitative statistics like economics is quite different from when you're analyzing data in a qualitative manner. And we cannot use, first of all, you see that even the sampling is purposive. We are selecting people who are already growing OSSP. We are also going to select others who are not growing. And the sample is not big enough to do all the sophisticated quantitative analysis that we are talking about. Where is it? So it's actually a different approach which you cannot use economic methods to analyze. Yeah.
My concern was, the outcome indicators are measurable. The outcome indicators that you have selected from your objective are measurable indicators. Like for example, willingness to pay, and we're talking about the market opportunities, and so these are the things like the outcome indicators, production. So one side you are looking at measurable indicators, which is quantitative indicators. Other side you are analyzing them in a qualitative manner. So it's something like you have to be careful. Like for example, if result says people are willing to pay. So can I take it as a conclusion? So should I just take it as a message? This is a message that I got.
Okay, I think that it depends on your discipline. If you are an economist and you think that qualitative data is not important, or it's not representative, then you will say it's a message. It's just a message. I don't have to regard it as a finding or as something that I can actually base my decision on. But if you are coming from my own discipline, this is also valid data. I can actually make decisions based on this finding. So it just depends on your discipline, where you are coming from and whether you think that this data is actually robust enough for you to base a decision on. So for me, from my own point of view, I would make a decision based on this.
Maybe
Hilda. Okay, Hilda, no, the first question was about Hilda, was the same as Fenestan. The second question is OFSP matures late. I don't think that I said OFSP matures late. There was actually Kabode, which people liked because it's also early maturing, but the only thing that they didn't like was that the roots were not many compared to the other varieties. And then yes, this is perceptions of adults. And that is why I also mentioned that this is actually perception. So the only way that I could interpret that data was that women, they think that youth are more involved than men because women are the ones who are working with the youth. They are the ones who are working in sweet potato, so they actually need the labor of the youth to help them in the field. And men, because they are not engaged in sweet potato, they actually don't know whether youth are involved or not. But there is also need, of course, to go and do another study, maybe on youth involvement, which was not the purpose of this particular study.
Okay, so we have just another 10 minutes. So another round, Margaret, with the next. So let's start with Juliet.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to when we got through that question to try but for me to follow up on the question that Jamie is asking about the design and what are we really trying to look at when you do a study similar to what or in the way that design has done on presenting. My understanding is and I agree with Kirimi, with five. Hi Kirimi. Sorry. Okay. I agree with five. I agree with five that we tend to look at these things from our disciplinary angle. But my understanding of using quantitative studies like this, and especially the design, the design is still better than me. But my understanding is the design here are different. You can approach the study by a qualitative study like this by and in this case you are trying to understand why and how things happen. That's my understanding. When you want to ask the question what, that's where we are as economists. We are very quantitative because we want to produce data to see these relationships and attribute one thing to another. But when you are asking the questions such as how and why, you are more likely to approach it answering those questions in the way that Netsayi is doing by looking at observing and hearing different opinions and triangulating those opinions. And here she is entering through focus groups. It could be individual, but you're presenting the same kind of questions to those people. And listening to the evidence and seeing how they are actually feeding each one another, and then coming up with some conclusive ideas of what is actually how things are happening and why they are happening. In this case, using statistics, as Netsayi points out, can be challenging. I've seen some papers done, quantitative papers where the sample sizes are really large, and they can do statistical tests of difference. But in most cases, we would not expect to see statistical analysis in studies such as this one. Thank you.
Do you believe that's okay, so I'm not sure if any of the people on web have questions, so we should give them a chance. Yes, okay. Thanks, Netsayi. There's a lot of information there. Looking at the objective of the project, which is presented in terms of developing a group of food and youth entrepreneurs, which we should link upstream to TNT and then downstream to DVM. Here we presented results from DVM. So Are there seed and root, medium-term seed and root entrepreneurs emerging? Are they making a business? And are we getting the linkages between upstream sources of chemistry and then feeding these CDMs, supplying these CDMs that you were talking about here?
Okay. When I went to the field, I think the only source of clean seed for the farmers was the VISTA project. So from that perspective, I'm not the best person to be able to address that, because when I was talking to the farmers, they were only mentioning the VISTA project as a source of the OSSC seed, but I don't know if there are other organizations that maybe SIT is working with or other individuals to develop the clean seed. Then in terms of you asked about the medium-scale entrepreneurs, right?
Yes. The objectives that you presented to develop the medium-scale seed and root entrepreneurs and to make the link between seed and root. But I don't see that coming out in
the presentation.
Yeah.
And also I think because when we went to the field, I had to talk to the VISTA team to say who are the seed multipliers that you are working with. So the seed multipliers that I have in the system that we made were the DVMs who were based in the villages. So I'm not sure whether the DVMs are also the medium scale multipliers or they are small scale multipliers.
We'll get back to you. Granary, I'll come back to you. Granary, hi Granary. Hi. I'll come back. Okay, so I'll give you a chance. You have a question? Yes, just make your comment now. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. It's been very insightful. As you know, you and I are working together in Malawi, and for this particular presentation, at least in terms of substantive matters, was particularly insightful for me. The comment I have one comment to make. First, I hope that this begins a conversation and an appreciation of household approaches in technology promotion. For example, at least in some of the evaluations, you've been able to note the importance of looking at sources or at households in terms of involving both men and women and perhaps leveraging the support of men in order for women to effectively participate in technology adoption. That's my first comment. My second comment is really to do with what our colleague, I think it is three. The comment on validity, the validity of qualitatively derived indicators. In this case, what I see when it comes to the manner in which you presented the data, I can focus just on willingness to pay. To me, what those statistics show me is that if you carry out a qualitative study in a particular environment like you did, you are not generalizing those findings beyond the villages that you actually collected that data. And what that data tells me is these are the perceptions of the local community on who might be or what proportion of the community might be able to buy. Or if it's buying or if it's the actual sweet potato. So these are their perceptions. And this is one way, the way we do it. Another way of doing it for those that present service is for asking individuals, will you be willing to pay for a buying? Will you be willing to pay for 1 kilo of potato yellow or let's say at this price? So you can do the survey when And remember, these are even perceptions, even when you ask that in the parent, because even if you say 75% of people in the parent say they will die, if you actually bring the sweet potatoes, it doesn't mean that all the 75% are going to die. Because it's still how they perceive what they might do. So there is also validity in qualitative difference in my case. And so the question is just not to generalize it beyond the confines where you collected that information.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Okay. Bola is actually very natural. Finish, right? Okay. So, Vidani?
After I was in the same comment, I was finished, and so it's about the significance of the findings. So if you look at the title of the disease itself, you are even going to Africa. Viable sweet potato technology in Africa.
No, that is the title of that is the name of the project. That is the name of the project. This is the name of the project.
So the issue is the scope of the study, so what the findings you are making and the previous speaker said. So whether you're looking qualitative or quantitative, so you come up with a conclusion, and that's conclusion to be specifically informed. So if you are getting maybe 20 respondents in Tanzania, you read it, it's quite difficult to suppress to a larger area. So we need to make sure actually the way you sample the area, depending on the objective. When I look at the objectives here, there are so many, but there are not many because, I'm saying there are many because sometimes following presentation one would see those because how those topics are very interrelated. Why not to extract the 3 or 4 sub-studies and make it properly, rather than having so many things and then in the end they are not connected at all. The other issue, how the approach you use, how can the findings you got, the problem is that inform the process. If you go in a village, you find, as you said, it's a woman crop. Why do you proceed comparing men and women? So that doesn't make much sense because you know already it's a woman crop. So it's better to adjust the questionnaire or the approach you're using. Also, your presentation didn't see much of improved varieties. You talk about local varieties, but still, I saw some division, even in the project in improved technology. They are not coming out in your presentation. So those are the critical issues that I don't want to go into the program. It's better to look at some other spots in the area and look at the environment support.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. I think, just to say that this is in Tanzania, in 7 districts that we visited, which I even explained at the beginning of the presentation. And if a crop is called a woman's crop, it doesn't mean that men are not involved. If a crop is called a men's crop, it doesn't mean that women are not involved. For example, maize was being referred to as a men's crop, but you find women in the field cultivating, growing maize, processing maize in their homes and so on. So the fact that it's a woman's crop actually has something to do mostly with who is controlling the benefits, who is marketing, who is making decisions about how it is cultivated. It doesn't mean that men are not involved at all in that crop. That's my response to that question. So it still makes sense to compare men and women because they are both engaged, even if that crop is called a woman's crop. Even when you look at that slide which I did earlier on the gender division of labor, you will also see that men are engaged in some other activities of sweet potato production. Then in terms of the improved technologies, yes, when you read the report is a little bit bigger. You also find mentions of these materials and carbohydrates and so on and things like that. But what was also happening was that in some of the villages, OSSP was not yet really widespread. So some people didn't, they knew about it, but they did not use it because the seed was not yet available in all communities. That is why it is also not coming up strongly in this presentation, and that is why it is also a formative evaluation, because a formative evaluation sometimes you actually do it before you actually implement the project. That's why we now call it a formative evaluation. And then once the project is fully rolled out, we may also go back again and the situation may also have changed. And then in terms of the many things, because this is a project, the viable sweet potato technologies in Africa, and the project had these 5 objectives. So the presentation was actually just following the objectives. For this objective, these are the findings and these are the conclusions. But of course, in a different forum, maybe if I was presenting at APA or some other place, I will have to just pull out maybe a certain section of that report, and maybe we've already written a paper on food nutrition security using some of this data, so we can actually pull out pieces that are actually coherent for different audiences. But here I was just presenting the report.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is more a comment. Just Consent didn't speak up, and just since you're going to be writing the report, there is the other technology for storing fresh fruits actually is in the house, because you said the women were afraid of theft in the outside structures. But I know they've done quite a bit of work with the sandbox and the layers of sand being in the house. And so as you're moving forward with recommendations, those are not the only 2 options. There's a third option that actually deals with the theft question, and people like the storage in a sandbox in the house.
Okay.
So you should be made aware of that as you move forward with recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I think we have to bring this to a close, but not without giving a chance to Kevin and Paul. Do you have any questions? Okay, go ahead. Yes, you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Netsayi, for a very informative study. Maybe I also waiting on the type of design and the type of study that you've done. I think we all need to understand that studies can be handled in different ways, and the best form of study is where we can actually do practically. And that is what the fellow was talking about, that we can't commonly do quantitative, but we never answer everything. That's why we need sometimes coordinated work to give immediate insight of some of the things we're dealing with. When I say that the community should be taken hand in hand in some of the work or studies, I think we're really considering to done in the same time in the same project, which was more quantitative. So maybe I think more work on comparing frankly what we call the quantitative and now what we are calling this qualitative, so that the immediate is going to answer some of the questions in the format of the quantitative work. I just have also a comment on I think the way the science of said the remains giving a lot of constraints. Maybe now exactly I have seen that it will be a big difference. She says that, well, I think I just can't remember exactly what she said, but the reason why men give a lot of constraints actually includes the fact that explaining themselves why they are not involved in their crop. So that's the issue about I think you could have done a little bit of problem to find out why they cause more constraints than the women. And also the women finding out that there is more problems on market and lack of market. It's very, very understandable because if the women are controlling more of the crop, then they are more likely to earn more money, more income, if they were to vote with more market in the parliament. So I think this is part of the reason why some of them would be talking about that there is no market. And then also this, when I look at the overall and particularly the part of the knowledge of nutrition and other knowledge, I realize I usually these points of real feedback and follow the life cycle of our project. These projects were in a new field. Generally, we are already in a lot of market campaign, a lot of media campaign, all that. So we find that being very well reflected in these channels, that the knowledge particularly for the men was not good, because the information has not been very robust. I think more what it tells us is that to do more of these projects, maybe achieve as we do more of the implementation of the new work on the ground. We need also to give people about how do we do better communication. And we need to show that we need to do the more work is needed to be done in that area. So overall, I think this is a great work. It's very informative, and we should inform on how we can do better work in more standing in our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kennedy. At this point, also your hand, Julia, but I need to encourage you to, yes, alright. So for every other person, you can follow up with the site in case you have any other questions. I wish to thank you all for coming to our session. We will have another one really soon on M&E. Julia has requested for that. But otherwise, thank you all. Feel free to have some questions and to get back to the office. A round of applause to Netsayi. Thank you.
So you can say bye to them. Bye all.
Okay, so after TNT, we'll talk